Hey, this is Scott Allen Miller on IT here on YouTube on the Sam IT channel. And today what I want to talk to you about is a standard pattern for developing bespoke or in-house custom software for the small business market. In SMBs, it's relatively common that someone wants to make a small application, and traditionally we used things like Access and some stuff like that to do this, and that's been less than ideal, and I think most people understand that they don't want to do that. But a lot of people don't know where to go other than not Access, and that leaves some problems as you can kind of skew off in all kinds of directions as you try to figure out what you should do rather than focusing on what you shouldn't. And one of the problems here is that there are so many ways that you can make this work, but there's only so many that really make sense in the majority of circumstances, and that's why we kind of have a standard pattern. It's not a best practice, it's nothing like that, but there is a pattern of how to approach this as kind of a baseline of, unless you have a reason not to do things this way, consider that this is probably the way to do it. And what that is one, so a couple things. One, your application is going to be web-based, unless you have a really strong technical reason why it can't be, and you'd better be sure about that. It's going to be web-based. That's what a modern application looks like, and it's what a modern application has looked like for a long time. Do not assume that you're going to start with something else and only go web-based if you have to. If you assume you go web-based, you're going to have a web interface, and there are situations where that doesn't apply. But don't start somewhere else. Start with the baseline, move away from it where it's applicable. To do this, the language of choice, if you're not already a competent programmer in some specific language, is PHP. Not because PHP is the most amazing language ever, not because PHP provides us all kinds of technology we don't have other places, but because it is simple, it is universal, it is very functional, it is custom designed for this exact use case, and it is super easy to find people with experience in PHP to help you, whether it's online or you got to hire someone or your company needs to maintain this in the future. For all of those purposes, PHP is the ideal language. Not only that, but if you need to hire PHP, they tend to be lower cost than a lot of other languages. You are neither constrained because it is a language that is very hard to learn or very obscure, like F# or OCaml or something like that, nor are you charged a premium because you're dealing with a language that is archaic and the only people who would be using it are people who are trapped with it, say COBOL or Fortran or Visual Basic. So PHP really fits into a perfect spot here where it meets all the checkboxes that you would reasonably have for a normal business application. If you need something other than PHP, chances are you will know, and it won't actually be that you need something else, it's that something else will have a specific benefit that makes sense. For example, Ruby on Rails, you may already know Ruby, or you may be interfacing with other Ruby components, so Ruby on Rails might make great sense. Or you may be a Python developer already, and Python with Django just fits your needs. All that's fine, but if you don't have something driving you to some other language, assume PHP. One of the really big reasons for this, as opposed to say C# or VB.NET that a lot of people feel might be easier to use, one, PHP is easier, two, it's more universal, and three, it doesn't provide any lock-in, whether real or perceived, to an expensive proprietary platform. PHP allows you to deploy whether to a platform as a service provider or to your own systems, whether they're free ones or paid ones or whatever. It provides you the flexibility in the future to do what's needed. Even if you have things today that lock you in, that doesn't mean you should invest into that technical debt. If you're making a new investment in new code, it should be towards something that gives you the freedom to do what you need in the future. This is just basic protections, basic best practices around developing. Don't create lock-in without very clear reason to justify it. And sometimes even with very clear reason, really work hard to justify that. Lock-in is a terrible thing. So we also assume, with the rarest of exceptions, that your application is going to need a database to hold the data on the back end. It's not always true, but certainly most of the times. If you don't need one, just don't use one. If you do need one, look to MariaDB or MySQL, as a lot of people have used that in the past. MariaDB is kind of where a lot of the development is going in the future. A lot of the best platforms, or the most common platforms, have moved to MariaDB from MySQL. For those who are not aware, MariaDB is a drop-in replacement for MySQL, so don't consider those two different products. Just if you're getting one, go check out MariaDB to get that. That's really ideal if you need a relational database that's on the slightly leaner side. It's fast and easy, and lots of people know it, but it's not the most robust. It's pretty robust. It's a good platform. But if you need a really powerful, robust database, or you're really versed in this one, Postgres is the other really awesome choice. Both of these, or all three of these really, are completely free. You have unlimited open source options. You can deploy to Windows, you can deploy to Linux, you can deploy to BSD, you can deploy to Solaris, you can put it on Mac. You have no lock-in. You can put it wherever it makes sense, including unlimited free platforms and hosting without limitations. So you are free and clear to do what you need to do. That said, it's also important to consider that relational databases may not make sense to you, for your project. A lot of things don't. People jump to that a lot of times when they're making internal software, and PHP specifically is super easy to work with MySQL or MariaDB. Most documentation kind of assumes that that's what you're going to do. But there are loads of NoSQL options out there, such as Redis or Mongo or Cassandra, all kinds of things, and they may make great choices for you depending on the type of data that you're going to be storing. If you're making a really simple application, you're probably going to lean towards traditional relational databases, not because they make sense, but because they're easy and assumed. But if you're doing a lot of things, especially if you're doing distributed software where you may need to handle like failover or unbelievable performance or geographically disparate locations, a lot of NoSQL options may be very, very appropriate for you. And remember, it is actually high complexity that tends to push you towards relational databases, and simplicity that pushes you away. That's not a given thing, but like, for example, Redis is a key value paired database, so it tends to be very good for extremely basic use cases, whereas something like MongoDB is a document database and is very, very good for document style data, great for like posts on a website or tracking assets, things like that. It tends to be very, very strong, whereas relational databases tend to be very good for financial data, where you need really, really strong relations between lots of different actors and objects. So there's a lot to choose from there, but make sure when you're looking at your database and your platforms that you're looking at things that are not going to lock you in unnecessarily for the future, because that will cost you potentially an extreme amount of money, because what is minor technical debt today can be crippling technical debt just a year or two down the road. And when your successors come, they may be very unhappy to find that you are in a situation where you've created an amount of debt that will cost them more than recreating the project to get away from. So that's just a baseline to start with, and I think really gives a strong, almost every time we have a conversation, which is pretty often, about how people are going to approach a problem like this, the answer really comes out to being PHP and MariaDB. It's free, it's easy, there's so many resources for it, there's always someone to help you. It's a good place to start. Only vary from that if you find your reason to have to. So thanks for joining me today on Sam IT, and you can check out more discussion about this video in the Mango Lossy community, mangolossy.it, and just a reminder that I will be speaking along with several other people at MangoCon in late July, which is just a couple weeks away, in Rochester, New York. You can check us out online at mangocon.it, and of course links in the notes.